So as we talked about today, one of the things we realized is the issues aren't always the same. And Breanne from Security Benefit will walk us through the fact that we have longer life expectancies, or you have longer life expectancies. I put myself in the wrong group of that. But how do we look at, how are those issues different and how might we address them?
Well, good morning, everyone. And I just wanted to start out by thanking the treasurer for the opportunity to be here today. It is an absolute honor. And I also wanted to acknowledge all of you because you are taking time out of your busy schedules with your jobs and your families to make one of the best investments, which is in yourself. I heard a quote the other day regarding money and personal finance, and it said, money is just a tool to create the life that you love. And to me, that means it's bringing you freedom. And so I hope that by the end of today that everyone sees that money is a tool that can bring you freedom. So what we're going to do today, just to get started, we're going to do an economic overview, just a quick look at where do women stand right now. We're then going to take a look at the retirement challenges that women are facing that are different than our male counterparts. And then we're going to close by going through this brochure that everybody should have in front of you. As the treasurer was saying, there are 6 steps in there. We really view this as a checklist. So we're going to walk through those 6 steps to help take charge of our financial future. So where do women stand right now? Well, we've never been in a better position. Women make up over half the workforce. Women earn the majority of all bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. Women account for more than half of all workers in management, professional, and related occupations. Women own millions of businesses. And also, according to McKinsey & Company, there's this generational transfer of wealth that's happening, where there's going to be $30 trillion in assets that are shifting into the hands of women by 2030. And there are more women than ever that are taking the financial responsibility for their households and making those financial decisions. So the bottom line is that women's economic clout is strong right now, and that's likely to continue moving forward. However, as the treasurer was saying, there are retirement challenges that women face that are different than our male counterparts. So we're going to look at some of those, starting with women have longer life expectancies. Also, women generally earn less income and have less savings. Women are more likely to interrupt their careers to raise children or care for aging family members, and women often invest too conservatively. So we're going to look at each of these in more detail, starting with women have longer life expectancies. So on average, women will be living 5 years longer than men. So while some would say that makes us fortunate, and I do agree with that, there are different financial consequences that then apply to living longer, such as that we're going to need our retirement dollars to stretch further. Women are also more likely to need some type of long-term care as we age, or also face additional healthcare expenses. And also, if we are living longer, there is a greater chance that we are going to be making financial decisions solely on ourselves. Now, moving on to step number 2, there's kind of some irony in this because while we're living longer, we need our retirement savings to last longer. We're confronted with other realities that make it harder to save, such as women generally earn less income and have less savings. So according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, women on average who work full-time earn 82% of what men earn, which that is really amazing to think about. And so what does this impact? This impacts our savings, it impacts our Social Security retirement benefits, and if you're lucky enough to have one, it would also impact your pension. This would also make us more vulnerable in the event of job loss or divorce. So let's move on to challenge number 3, which is interrupting careers to care for children or aging family members. And with this one, I think of my mom. My mom stayed at home she's a teacher, stayed home for 10 years with my sister and I out of the workforce. And I know that she would not take back that for the world. She absolutely loved that. But there were then financial consequences, such as lost income and employer benefits, lower Social Security retirement benefits. So there's things to think about. Also because she was then relying on my dad for income, on also healthcare coverage. So you have to think about in the event of divorce or a spouse's job loss. So there's just a lot to think about if you are taking time out of the workforce, so you just have to think about that. And lastly, women often invest too conservatively. So whether that's because women aren't aware of their overall investment options or we're just generally more risk averse, if we don't have any risk at all in our portfolio, we don't have any opportunity for reward. So we really have to find a good balance between that. Now, when we're thinking about this, not all women will face all of those challenges that I just discussed, but I think all of us can think of, a friend or a family member or a coworker that at least some of those challenges apply to. So what we're going to spend the majority of the time on today are these 6 steps. So if everybody could open up their brochure. And as the treasurer was saying, these are the 6 steps that we're going to walk through to take charge of your financial future. So I think a great thing to do with this is to really think of this as a checklist. So, have I thought about this before? Maybe you have a question on one of these sections. Maybe it's something that you haven't reviewed recently. We also have so many vendors that are here today that can help answer any questions on any of these areas, and also write down any questions that you have for the sessions later and the great panelists. So we're going to walk through each of these steps. And again, think of this as like a checklist. So number 1 is going to be taking control of your money. Number 2 is becoming a more knowledgeable investor. 3, advocating for yourself in the workplace. 4, planning for your retirement. 5, protecting your income and assets. And 6, creating an estate plan. And so to start, we're going to do taking control of your money. And the treasurer and I, we were talking about this. This one is so foundational. And this really sets the stage for everything else in financial planning. So the first thing to really think about is realizing that you have to take responsibility for your financial well-being. So what that means to me is, not saying, my spouse handles our finances or my significant other, really turning to yourself and saying, I'm going to be responsible for my financial well-being. It also means knowing what your cash flow is. So what's going in, what's coming out every month, and then making sure that that's a positive cash flow. And I ask myself a lot, where exactly is my money going? I mean, how many of us have went into Target for one thing and ended up with $200 worth of stuff? I mean, that happens to me very frequently. And I think there's sometimes better ways that we could be utilizing our money. I could be saving that, I could be putting that towards another goal, or maybe something else that brings me joy, such as a cup of coffee in the morning. And so once we figure out this cash flow, once we've really taken account of where is my money going, something else we really need to think about is managing our debt. So especially I think of high interest debt, such as credit cards. We need to be eliminating that as soon as possible, because that makes it really challenging to be able to accumulate wealth and be investing if we have a lot of debt, especially high income debt. So it's so important to make a plan to tackle that. So once we've done all of those steps, I think it's really important to think about creating an emergency fund. So that would be 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. So again, 3 to 6 months. All of these are so foundational, so important. I would really encourage everybody to, even if you think that you have everything under control, just go back and review that. Make sure that you know exactly where your money's going and that we're living within our means. So now we're going to move to step number 2, which is becoming a more knowledgeable investor. And you are doing that by being here today. So if you're just starting out, get some basic information. Everyone that's in this room today is going to have a unique financial situation. Everyone is going to be at a different place. But something that you can do with this basic information is we have a booth, at our security benefit booth, we have a brochure that goes over a lot of basic terminology. What's a stock, what's a bond, what's a mutual fund. Even if you don't yourself need that, maybe there's somebody that you know that you could share that with. So we do have that at the security benefit booth. Also, today there's going to be a lot of information. So don't feel overwhelmed. Just take small steps, learn as you go. But I think a common theme that you're going to hear today is to not postpone getting started. So many things with finance, the better that you can start, the better. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Whether that's here today or if you're already working with a financial advisor, always feel comfortable that you can ask questions. The best financial advisors want to educate you, and they want you to feel comfortable to ask your questions. Now, if there's anyone that's in here that is a more experienced investor or you're doing it on your own, just make sure that your portfolio is aligning with your goals, your time horizon, your risk tolerance. Really understand where your money's at, what do you own, what's the vehicle that it's in, and have a game plan to avoid volatile markets. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things is, something goes wrong in the market, there's a downturn, and people start pulling out their funds, they make an emotional reaction. And one of the best things that you can do is to work with a financial advisor to help stop those knee-jerk reactions. So now we're going to transition to step number 3, which is advocating for yourself in the workplace. And this one is really challenging. And this is something that I've struggled with myself. There's been many times in my career where I've been offered a promotion and I gave the corporate answer, which was, I will do whatever the company needs me to do. And I just blindly would accept it. I wouldn't get any of that pay information in writing. I would just blindly accept that. And that's a mistake. We should be negotiating our starting salaries. We should be negotiating any types of raises or promotions. And when we're not doing that, we are leaving so much money on the table. We're leaving an estimated $1 million or more because we are not negotiating our salaries. So I believe the treasurer is putting together a list of resources where it will show links on what the best ways to do this are. So please reference that. Also, go out online, figure out what are other people in my industry making that are doing a similar job. Ask around. That is a great first step. Also, when we're thinking about raises and promotions, we really need to speak up on our accomplishments. We need to take on those challenging assignments. We need to make sure the company knows the value that we're bringing to our organizations. Because I think as women, it's so easy to just sit and wait and hope that others are noticing all the hard work that we're doing. And then there's a lot of times that we just end up waiting and waiting and waiting. So we really have to speak up. We really need to advocate for ourselves. Also, when I'm thinking about, promotions, if there is a job that you are interested in, I think one of the best things that you can do is go to your manager and make sure that you let them know that that is a job that you want and ask, what are the steps that I need to take to get there? Transitioning to another thing that can be negotiated, which is, part-time work, flexible hours, remote work. This is also so critical. And not every employer, not every job can you do this. I totally understand that, but it is becoming more and more common. So if this can mean that you have a better work-life balance, that can also mean that you can continue to take in an income. That is so key. So make sure that we're negotiating that if possible. And one other comment that I'll make on this topic that's a little bit different is around burnout. And we're trying to do it all. We're trying to have a personal life, we have our family, we have our career, we're trying to do the best at that. And, I was on a panel a few months ago and they asked us what our top priority was. And we all said our health, our mental and our physical health. Because if we don't have that, we can't be the best in our career. We can't be the best for our family. So I would just encourage you, find something that you love, that you can be consistent with. Again, mental and physical health. That goes such a long ways. So just always remember to put yourself first. So now we're going to transition to planning for retirement, which is my favorite section. And so what this chart shows is really the power of starting to save now. So this shows what $2,000, $5,000, and $10,000 a year if you were to start at 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60. This is a 6% rate of return. I think that's really fair right now. What you would have by the age that you were 65. So as you can see, the earlier that you can start, the more that you can invest, the better. And something that the treasurer and I had talked about is, if you look between 20 and 30 at 10,000 a year, that number is doubling. And that's incredible. I think that just shows the more that you can put in, the earlier that you can start, the better, but it is never too late to start. And so if you're wondering, okay, well, where do I begin? So a great place to start is your employer-sponsored plan. So think your 401k if you are a teacher, your 403b. A lot of these plans offer matches. So you want to be contributing at least up to the match because that is just free money. Now, if you have maxed that out, other things to think about is IRAs, traditional or Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs do have an income limit. So if you're a high earner, you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. And a tip that I always say too is make sure you're just automatically investing. That way you don't even have to think about it and it's just going in. One other piece of this retirement planning puzzle is Social Security. And Social Security is a major source of guaranteed lifetime income for most Americans. Meaning once you start getting those payments, you'll get those every month for the rest of your life. This started back in 1940. It provides retirement benefits, it provides disability benefits, survivors benefits, spousal benefits, but for the sake of time today, we are just going to quickly touch on retirement benefits. So to qualify for this, you need at least 10 years of work or 40 credits. And so if you're wondering, well, how much am I going to get from Social Security? How much can I expect? Well, it's based on the number of years you've worked and the amount you've earned. They take your 35 highest earning years. What I would encourage you to do is to go to ssa.gov. And when you go into ssa.gov, it's going to have you log in. And at the very top, it's going to show you this bar. And that's going to first say, have you qualified? It's going to show you a check mark. Then as you go down, what you're going to see is a chart that looks just like this, which is your estimated earnings. Now, the earliest that you can start taking benefits is 62. However, that would be up to a 30% reduction in benefit than if you were to wait till your full retirement age, which is 66 or 67. Now, for every year that you wait after that, up until age 70, that is an 8% increase. Now, this is a very personal decision. Everyone in here is going to have a different reasoning why they want to take it at a certain age. I would just encourage you to work with a financial advisor on this because it can get very complicated. When you are out on SSA.gov, it is going to show you a list of all of your earnings. So I would also encourage you, make sure that that looks accurate to you and that there isn't anything missing, that there's not a year of your earnings that's missing. So again, would encourage you to go to SSA.gov. As we are getting closer to retirement, there's going to be some things we need to think about, such as when am I going to retire? How long might my retirement last? What might my healthcare costs look like? And then it gets a little more complicated when we start thinking about taking distributions. What's the most tax efficient way to do that? What's a safe withdrawal rate? Again, encourage you work with a financial advisor to help you plan all of this out. Now, two last slides here that we're going to touch on. The first one is protecting your income and assets. So here you're going to see a lot of different types of insurance as well as different ways to protect your business. So life insurance, disability insurance, home and auto, health. I just want to share a quick story about long-term care insurance. My grandparents were farmers out in western Kansas, and they lived to be in their 90s, which is absolutely incredible. They ended up both needing to be in a long-term care facility, and that is extremely expensive. They both ended up being in there for 3 years each. It is $6,000 to $7,000 a month. So, and there was a period where they were overlapping. So then you're looking at $12,000 to $14,000 a month. And that is a lot of money, especially if you think about they had already been in retirement for 30 years. Luckily they had a little bit of long-term care insurance that helped cover a portion. But I think the main point of the story is to tell you that my mom had never thought about getting long-term care insurance until she saw her parents in that situation. And at that point, it was too late to get long-term care insurance. She had waited too long. So I tell that story to share, sometimes with financial services and insurance, it's better to start thinking about these things, planning for these things, even before you think you might need to. So there's going to be a great session later today that goes over all of these different types of insurance. If this is something that you haven't thought about yet, maybe this is something that you'd like to get more information on. If you have any questions, that would be a great session to go to. And the last thing that we're going to touch on just very quickly is estate planning. To me, this always sounded very scary, but it's not. It is just a map that reflects the way that you want your personal and financial affairs to be handled in the case of incapacity or death. And who you're really doing this for is for your family members when you're typically in a really challenging time. So here on the screen, you're going to see a bunch of different documents that are focused around estate planning. Some of these you might already be familiar with. The key with this is that you work with an attorney that specializes in estate planning. So again, this would be an attorney that specializes in estate planning. And today at lunch, we do have a panel of experts that are here. So that would be a fantastic time. If you have any questions on any of these documents or on estate planning, I would make sure that we ask the questions to those panelists. So just to summarize, my key takeaways. My key takeaways would be, make sure I know where my money's going, make sure I'm living within my means. I would definitely be advocating for myself in the workplace where you're leaving way too much money on the table. And then the last thing that I would say as well is to start saving now. And it's never too late to start, and just know that there's always a financial advisor that's here to help.
So thank you, Brianne. Thanks for being with us. So a lot of key things to look at. And as we look to that, Vivian, I might just ask you for a moment. I know TIAA did a white paper on retirement. Is there anything in particular you would want to underscore?
Brianne covered such a wealth of wisdom. I'm pretty sure there are no gaps in there, but I'm going to focus on it's never too late. It is never too late if you're sitting here right now and going, what is my corporate match? And am I taking advantage of that? Then go home and look it up. Because starting today, you can only control what you can control. So I'd encourage you all to take any bit of nugget from all of that wisdom being shared and try to apply it today in whatever unique way that applies to your lives right now.
So great point. And then the other thing that we talked about is despite all of our efforts to be really good at planning, sometimes life happens. And how do you play through? How do you adjust to that?
I'm happy to start here because I feel like, what was that quote? Life is what happens when you're planning, making other plans. Because I felt like there was a very long period of my life where I felt like that applied to me. When my kids were 2 and 4 years old, I went through an unexpected divorce in my life. All of a sudden, I became a sole income earner, breadwinner, mortgage holder on a house that I could not afford on a single salary, single income, and the provider of all of the care of my kids. And I remember thinking back then, I'm in financial services. How did this happen to me? Well, because life happens. And all we can do is look at what's in front of us, and what became my priority for me was my kids. Truth be told, I didn't care that I had to sell the house. I didn't care that I had to cash out my retirement in order to help settle some financial obligations that my partner had encumbered us to. What I cared about was the future of my children. So I put all of my attention on, making sure that I could fund their college savings plan. And quite honestly, this is why I think I'm so passionate about my day job. I oversee college savings for TIAA. I feel very strongly that it doesn't matter how much you save, it's just the practice of saving, as Brianne says, making sure that you're putting money away every month. And for me, that sometimes meant $25 a month, just so that I could cover everything else for my kids. Fast forward 25 years, my kids are both graduates of universities and are student loan free, unencumbered by loans in their 20s. And I feel really proud about that. Whereas I probably looked around my life over the last 20 years and said, it would have been nice to have taken those European vacations or head off to Disney World. But that wasn't my life at the time. For me, it was about making sure that my unique financial circumstances were covered by the decisions and the practices that I was employing in doing this.
So, perfect, thank you. Finding a way through, yes, thanks. We may bounce around as we are able. This 5 off of whatever that clock is will have us right on time. So anyway, so we're still in good shape. But Emily, one of the things we talked about was, how do you cut through all the clutter sometimes? So much information on some things. How do I know where to look?
Yeah, I would kind of add to that list of retirement challenges that Brianne outlined is financial education and financial literacy is sort of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It's nowhere in that there's not good quality, widespread financial education really out there. It's not consistent in school. You kind of are left to sort it out on your own, which is a little baffling given the consequences. And it's everywhere in that it's probably the most, maybe second only to maybe wellness and nutrition, the most saturated field of books and podcasts and, just people out there telling you, TikTokers, for heaven's sakes. If one more client sends me a TikTok, I'm gonna scream. Don't listen to anyone on TikTok. We can start right there. But it's just an extremely saturated field. So when you are out there trying to educate yourself, who do you listen to is a really, really hard thing. And I would say you all are doing a great job. You showed up here today, you hauled yourselves out and got so pretty on a Tuesday morning. bright and early to listen to qualified professionals. So that's the first thing is, does this person have the relevant industry credentials that they should have? And in the personal financial planning space, kind of the CFP is your sort of high water mark. It's something to know about that is that designation does come with what's called a fiduciary standard. Just jot that down, Google it later. It means that, we are legally required to put your interests ahead of our own, and that's always a good first step. I also make a lot of medical analogies in, kind of the financial advising space. Think of kind of the idea of getting a second opinion. Listen to a lot of it. Ask different professionals. Read different things. Consume a wide array. Compare and contrast. And listen for common themes, things that you're hearing over and over and over again. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat in financial planning, but there are a handful of bellwether, perennial, tried and true things that honestly are pretty boring and don't sell books, right? So those are the ones you kind of want to listen for, and if you're hearing the same thing over and over and over again, those are kind of going to be those foundational concepts. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and we also talked about the unknown.
Yeah.
And some are known, some are unknown, and
Yeah.
that is so critical again to the foundation.
Sure, yeah, and Vivian hit on this, and I love that she brought these up, and Stephen wanted to make sure that we touched on, this is all well and good in theory, and then what happens when life gets complicated. So I kind of think about it in terms of the known unknowns. Those are the things that we know might happen, that we can anticipate potentially happening. Someone dies, there's an illness, those types of things. Those are things you can typically insure: life insurance, disability insurance, homeowners liability, all those long-term care, all of those really important things. And then there's the unknown unknowns. Those are the things that might happen to us, but nobody plans for, nobody budgets for. A divorce when you have very small children. That's a serious curveball. One that came the way of myself and my husband was that we encountered infertility trying to build our family, and spent several years and tens of thousands of dollars, just a shocking amount of money, having our 3 beautiful children. And nobody budgets for that, right? You're not spending your 20s squirreling away money for IVF. People don't do that. So what do you do with those? I think ideally we've made those good choices early on if you've had the benefit of good financial education, so you do have some savings in your back pocket that you can redirect, some income you can redirect. And when you don't, I think that's when you get creative. And Vivian articulated a lot of these things. You think outside the box, you make bold, dynamic changes. You sell a house, you change jobs, you go renegotiate your salary, you pick up a part-time job. I know women and couples that took up a part-time job just for the health insurance that covered fertility, for example. Evenings and weekends, making coffee at Starbucks. They have great benefits. Bold action, foundational changing kinds of things. So,
Thank you for all of that. So, and thanks to the panel. I have a couple of things to wrap up with, but is there anything that reoccurred to you you wanted to make sure that you shared?
I just wanted to touch on the career thing, because as important as it is to advocate for your own careers, it's really important to balance your own needs and your family's needs against that. During those years, or in the middle of the midpoint between the early crazy years and today, I took a job change that took me, if you looked at the career choices perspective, a little bit backwards. And the reason was I needed to spend time with family. I needed to deprioritize my own needs against what my children needed. And so we shouldn't be afraid to do that. We should continue to advocate for as much money as we can get. But remember, your own priorities are what matter. And every one of us have different ones. That's how I think.
Awesome. So thank you. Thanks for the expertise. As you can see, women are really good at this. And I want to underscore that. I am really fortunate, and thank you for the opportunity to serve as treasurer. But our bond department, our fiscal department that does all of the transactions, roughly 36 billion a year, manages, we currently have about 9.5 billion in cash. Our entire unclaimed department, 600 million in unclaimed dollars, all women. All very good at their job. I am so lucky to have the team. So, Brianne, Vivian, and Emily will be here through the day. Continue to look for them and questions that you have. We want to see what those are and find what those answers are. The other thing that I would add is there's not one way. Each of us has our own way that's just a little different. And my background, as I was in financial services, was building even more boring stuff in quantitative things and asset allocation models, which everyone came here to listen about. But one of my colleagues actually did a great job of explaining to me both the asset allocation and the fact that there's not one route. And she had come back to work after going home, and her 9-year-old daughter had wanted to surprise her by baking cookies for her. And they turned out awful. But she said, well, this is really nice. What kind of cookies are these? And Joy said, well, Mom, those are chocolate chip cookies. And after looking at both the attempted cookies and the remaining batter, Julie saw there was no chocolate chips. So she asked about that, and her daughter replied simply, well, I just left whatever you didn't have out of the mix. And two of the other things that she left out, I still remember because they were kind of funny. One was the soda, because she wasn't sure whether to use Pepsi or 7-Up. She laid that out. And the other was the vanilla, because it was on the top shelf and she couldn't reach it. And she thought, well, what impact could 2 teaspoons have on this big mix of stuff? And of course, 2 teaspoons either way, pretty big difference. So as we work through our retirement plan, we know roughly what we want to take out, and we want to have a good recipe to get there. If you're a master chef and you know how to mix stuff together, have a blast, go at it. If you're not quite sure, just get a good recipe. But I don't know how many chocolate chip cookie recipes there are, and your favorite one is probably different than mine, than yours, right? But there's a range of things that will work, and making sure that you have that expert to check that is what we want to have a chance to share with you today. So thanks for the chance to be with us. Please check out our sponsors, get more of those tickets, and have a wonderful day. Lauren, I'll bring it back to you. And let's